Hi everybody, welcome to Bio 132. This guide is to help you learn how to study for a class like A&P, a very high content class. I often have students say things to me like, I thought I knew it, but I only got 45% on the exam. Other students tell me I was totally ready. I knew everything. I was completely ready to go, but then I forgot everything the minute I sat down to take the exam. And sometimes I have students that say, nobody can learn this much, it's impossible. So the problem that I see is that students often have confidence where they shouldn't. They think they know the information well, but they don't. Why the disconnect? Why are students so off on what they know versus what they think they know? Imagine you hear a new song on Apple Music or Pandora or Spotify or even on the old radio on your car. You like it, maybe you replay it a few times, and pretty soon maybe you introduce your friends to it. And then you hear it everywhere. You can sing along to it, you hear it at parties, you have it on your phone, you listen to it before class and after class, and you think you know it. But if I asked you to sing me every word from every line in that new song, could you do it? There is a difference between recognition and recall. On a test, you are not being tested on recognition. All of the terms listed as choices on a multiple choice test are going to have something to do with the question. There won't be any choices that just don't fit and you can just cross off. So you have to learn recall. Unfortunately, most students don't study the way they need to enhance recall. They only study for recognition. When you study, do you come to class and take notes and then skim over your notes many times for studying? Do you read through the textbook multiple times? Do you watch my videos or the YouTube videos several times? Unfortunately, all of these are not a great use of your time. They're ineffective. All of these are passive. You're just reading or listening to somebody else's work. There's been a lot of studies done about how we learn best. And this learning pyramid shows the different types of activities that you can do. If you look next to each activity, there's a percentage. And that percentage relates to how much you'll remember of that activity 2 weeks later. For example, if you sit in on a lecture and you listen very carefully, you're only going to remember about 5% of the information 2 weeks later. If you read your textbook, even if you read it multiple times, you're only going to remember about 10% of the information. If you have an audiovisual, watching a movie, for example, on YouTube, 2 weeks later, you'll remember about 20% of that information. The key takeaway is that active learning strategies down here on the bottom give you a much better bang for the buck. You're going to remember much more of the information if you use active learning techniques. Why is this? Well, when you learn, you are making new connections within your brain. Connections that are made easily can also be lost easily. So we have to reinforce those connections over and over again to make them strong enough for you to remember the learning. It is the struggle that you remember. The reason that some types of activities help you to learn more than others is that some force you to make the connections quicker, and the connections you make are stronger. If you learn something too easily, you won't remember it. So what are we going to do? First, I encourage you to gather the information. This is where you're sitting in class, taking notes, or perhaps listening to a video lecture. You're going to be reading the textbook and watching videos. This is usually where most students stop. They are familiar with the material, but they haven't really struggled yet. The next thing is you're going to make connections with these active learning techniques. You have to do this learning yourself. No one else can do it for you. Your neural connections will be different than mine or different from your study partners. In this stage, you have to do the work yourself. And the last step is to struggle to reinforce these connections. You have to keep testing yourself in order to make those connections really strong and lasting. I have given you review questions for every chapter that we're going to be covering. They're blank. I don't give you the key, and I'll tell you why in a few slides. Once you've gathered the information, it's time to fill out the key. You can use your notes, you can use the textbook, you can use the videos I made for you, or any other tool at your disposal. One note, your textbook has an index in it. If you have a paper copy, it's at the back. If you have the online version, you can also access the index from the table of contents. You can locate any of the information you need by going to the index, and it will tell you the exact page you need to go to in the textbook. Once you've filled out the entire review question, it is now your key. You will use this key to make sure your future work is correct. I don't give you the key because this step of finding the information is very important to your learning. As soon as you finish your key, print out a new blank copy of the review questions. Label it number 1. Try your best to fill out the new blank copy from memory. Do not look at your key, not even a peek. You're supposed to be testing your recall here. Wait to look at the key until you're completely done with the entire set of review questions. Then, you're going to highlight any areas where you couldn't answer or weren't sure. Now, you can look at your key and check if your answers are correct. Highlight anything you answered wrong. You want to keep a copy of what you didn't get right. Go through using your key and fill in the correct answers. Now it's time for a rest. Walk away and do something else for a little while. Later that day, or perhaps even the next day, come back. You're going to print out a new blank copy. Label this one number 2. Repeat the process. Try your best to fill it out from memory. Do not look at your key until you're done. You should be struggling to recall the information, and it's okay if you can't fill it all out. At the end, then go look at your key and highlight anything that was blank or incorrect. I'll tell you how it's going to help you in one word. Exam. If you encounter this question on the exam and you had not practiced the review questions, you might be confused because you know all these words have something to do with digestion and enzymes. However, if you follow my advice and practiced until you could fill out the review questions from memory, you would know very well that secretin is the hormone that is released in response to increased acid or chyme in the duodenum. I promise you, all of the exam questions correlate to information on the review questions. So this seems like a lot of time. You're probably going to have to fill out blank review questions 5, 6, or 7 times before you can do it from memory. So how do we save time? It sounds kind of funny, but if you do this process twice a day, every day, you will learn it very quickly. It will keep you on schedule with the rest of the class. You won't have to take extra study time before the exam because you've been studying as you proceed through the modules. So you're already done. By the time you get to the exam, you've done your studying, and you don't have to find 5 or 10 hours on a Saturday to study so that you can take your exam before it closes on Sunday or Monday. Another thing you can do, if you answer a question 3 times in a row correctly, meaning it doesn't get highlighted, you can skip it as you go forward. This is why the highlighting helps. It keeps you on track and it makes you understand which ones you know and which ones you don't. And there's no sense in overstudying something you can answer properly. So once you've gotten it a couple times, skip it. Once you can complete the entire set of review questions from memory, you don't have to do them every day. Go ahead and move on to the next chapter and come back every couple days just to see if you can still do it. If you've forgotten everything on the review sheet, start over with your highlighting and reviewing. A couple of things to keep in mind. It's really important to take a break. You need to give yourself adequate time to rest. Your brain can only learn so fast. There is a reason why every teacher you've ever had has told you not to cram right before the exam. Even if you manage to cram enough in there to do okay on the exam, you are going to forget it relatively fast. In a course like anatomy and physiology, this is a terrible idea. Everything we learn builds on something that we learned before. And so cramming and forgetting means you're not going to be well prepared for the next set of information. It's also important to not cheat. Don't look at the answers on the key until you are finished with the entire set of review questions. You want to measure how much you know. You don't want to be that student who shows up at the exam and says, "Well, I thought I knew it, but I guess I didn't." Don't be that student. Make sure you know what you know. And more importantly, make sure you know what you don't know. This is why we use the highlighting, so that you can see what you know and see what you don't. It's also important to practice often. You have to do this often enough that you only have to remember information from 12 to 24 hours ago. It's hard enough to remember. You don't want to be doing this every 5 days. You won't remember any of it. Not only that, but don't try to do this 10 times in a row. You're working on your short-term memory, not your long-term memory. You have to remember stuff from the beginning of this semester when you're at the end of the semester. It's important to start early. Time can be your friend or it can be your enemy. If you start on these review questions right away, as soon as you finish watching the videos, you will have plenty of time to complete them before the exam. If you wait until the exam is looming over your head, you will not only not have time, but it'll be ineffective. It's also important to review. Even after you've finished the review questions and can fill them out from memory, and you move on to the next chapter, always come back every couple days just to look over the information. My suggestions for how to approach this course are to first watch the videos that are linked in each of the checklists. Then skim through the textbook. If it's too difficult, go ahead and just read the captions under the figures. Work through your Learn Smart assignment. This will reinforce the information in the textbook. Then, complete your review question key. You will probably have to go back and watch the video one more time and go through the textbook one more time just to complete the review questions. This is why I don't give you the key. I make you create your own. It's because it forces you to review. Then you're going to test yourself without any notes on the blank review questions and repeat that step until you can answer everything without consulting your notes. This is a tough course, but I know you can do it. Follow these directions and it'll help you. Have a great day. See you in class.